Where is it a better place to live? Seoul, South Korea, or Pyongyang, North Korea?
I don't know. It depends on who you are.
So-called tankies often make ridiculous statements in their unyielding defense of all things communism. For me, that becomes a more serious issue when that rhetoric turns into defending or denying genocides, such as Ben Carollo has done recently. It seems like the objectionable, abhorrent statements we're about to go over would also be deemed problematic by the Young Turks.
And contributor for the Young Turks, Ben Carollo.
Uyghur Muslims, how do you feel about them? So you're pro-concentration camp?
No, not pro-concentration.
Okay, so where are the Uyghur Muslims right now?
Do you know what the East Turkmenistan movement is?
Don't change topic.
I'm not. This is the same topic.
Uyghur Muslims.
You don't know that the East Turkmenistan movement was labeled by the United States of America as a terrorist organization.
Oh, got it. Okay, so pro-concentration
inside
camp.
of China.
Got it. The reality of China is that if you disagree with the government, you disappear, like Jack Ma. Yeah, if you disagree, you disappear.
Oh, because that was his only thing. He just
or
disagreed.
if you're a
he
dissident
wasn't a
group,
billionaire,
like
right?
the Uyghur Muslims,
hold up,
you get put in re-education camps where we have drone footage of people that are forced to eat pork against their religious conscience.
Are you talking about the East Turkmenistan movement?
No, I'm talking about the Uyghur Muslims that you're trying to spin in some sort of weird way.
We can't even look.
So what do they do to Tibet, though?
No. So the Associated Press. You think that the Associated Press is out there carrying water for China?
Hold on a second. The Associated Press also wrote in other articles that these were quasi-concentration camps.
Yeah. So like,
yeah,
this is the thing.
yeah,
like,
concentration camps.
Like, this
great.
Is the thing. The Associated Press fundamentally is like this right-wing bias.
Government in China is in fact forcing the Muslim minority in the country to go to essentially internment camps.
Associated Press actually goes and they write an article and they talk about it, because the reality is we can have, if we want to live in the real world, we can have a conversation about whether or not China was going too heavy-handed in dealing with the East Turkmenistan movement, which is a terrorist movement. But a lot of Uyghur Muslims, even in Xinjiang, are happy that now they can finally drink alcohol without having to worry about bombing attacks and stabbing attacks. Now we can have a conversation about whether or not they were too heavy-handed, about whether or not they're racially profiling.
And they want to crush their Turkish identity. Oh yeah, you're all Chinese. One of the things they're doing in the concentration camps is making them learn Chinese. So they'll stop speaking Turkish and start speaking Chinese instead, so they could basically wipe out the identity altogether. That is textbook ethnic cleansing, and the Chinese government is doing it.
Now we can have a conversation about whether or not they were too heavy-handed, about whether or not they're racially profiling.
The propaganda is insane.
The reality
Let's have a conversation about concentration camps. Like, maybe we shouldn't be forcing them to eat pork against their religious conscience. Murdering a lot of them is probably wrong. There's really not a conversation to be had. Like, you're defending concentration camps. I think they're wrong.
If there's a major terrorist movement in the United States, how do you think we should respond to that?
Uyghur genocide denial. A New Lines investigation reveals a network of charities funneling millions into left-wing platforms that take Beijing's side on the genocide.
Obviously, Lenin, Mao, today.
Oh, you're a big fan of Mao?
Mao's a pretty interesting character.
How many people did he murder?
How many people did he murder? I mean, how many people do you think he murdered? How many people did George Bush
45 million,
murder?
more or less.
What we need to understand is that China is a democracy. And they are going to make laws
hold on a second.
based off of their individual material conditions.
How are they a democracy exactly?
Are you kidding me? Aside from the fact that the central government has a 95% approval rating.
So they're a democracy. Do they have senators or congressmen in China?
Well, there's about 1,000 members of their National People's Congress, and then obviously they have a system of local people's Congresses.
And so you don't think those elections are rigged?
I'm going to test you. What does it take to get on the ballot in China?
What is it? A lot of money, power, and influence, and killing the right people.
Oh, that's weird, because it's actually illegal to spend money on campaigning in China. There's actually a very specific answer to this.
You think that a dissident Chinese person could run up against Xi Jinping right now? So let me ask you a question.
How do you think?
You're pro CCP. So you think it's okay?
How do you think elections work? How do you think elections work in China?
It's very simple. You're born into the right family. You have connections to the right people.
You can't answer.
What's Xi Jinping's lineage?
What does it take to get on the ballot in China?
You have to have the right connections.
Don't know the answer.
Yes, I do.
No.
I do know. You can't just all of a sudden pop up.
Have you read the law? Have you read their law?
What happened to tank men?
I have actually read through. No.
You think the law actually applies?
Chat. Okay.
So what happened to the Tiananmen Square?
Listen, this is the answer.
What happened to Tiananmen
that
Square?
Charlie Kirk doesn't know because he has no idea how democracy
What happened to
works in China.
Tiananmen Square?
You need to get
How about
10
Tibet?
signatures to get on the ballot in China. That's it, 10 signatures. How many people does it take to start a recall in China?
How many temples did they destroy in Tibet?
How many?
So you think you could recall Xi Jinping?
How many people do you think it takes to
You
get
understand,
a recall?
I have to be honest, you are such an unbelievable fool to believe that China actually has a democracy.
Well, look, here's the thing. They've tripled their average wages. They've eliminated extreme poverty. They have amassed popular support in China. They have the strongest economy in the world. And right now, they are.
How many people live in abject
peaceful
poverty in Western
international
China?
trade,
More
peaceful
people than the
international
population
trade.
of America do not have access to clean water or toilets, and that's your idea of lifting people out of poverty.
Strains
I have a
of
question. Are you on
coronavirus at the
CCP
same
payroll?
time.
Because I don't think like a sane individual could believe this.
I wish. You think I got that kind of money?
Oh, he wants to be a CCP agent.
You think you think China is funding me? That's so disconnected from reality.
I'm just going to be honest.
That's so disconnected
no
from
rational
reality.
person could believe the stream of absolute nonsense that you are. You'd have to be paid for this. Like, you're kind of like a walking hologram of insanity.
I don't know what to tell you, buddy. But
I just hope it's worth it.
it sounds more like you're talking into a mirror at this point.
So there were a few clips in there. I know I clipped it, so like that's to make it sound like maybe he was getting paid to promote Chinese propaganda, and you know, there's no evidence of that. But ultimately, I don't care. This things he says about we're about to hear on the gulags. I don't think is more so indefensible than anything than claiming China is a goddamn democracy. So to the argument that he is just a deranged, moronic individual. Sorry, I often misgender them for obvious reasons, accidentally, of course. But on topic, I don't really think I could help anyone who thinks that China is a democracy. But I mean, how could a country that has a social credit system where we're saying bad things about the Chinese party affects your odds, your chances of getting a house or getting your children getting into a school or getting a better job. I'm not here to help anyone who thinks fucking China is a democracy. You know, it's TFG. But Ben has many awful tweets. But this one in particular I found disgusting. I found abhorrent. I found it's not the lie. It's not the obvious propaganda. It's fire plus Tibet plus protests. Well, what do you think you would get in a search result with those three terms? Tibet, fire, protests. You're going to get images of people lighting themselves on fucking fire because they don't want to be ruled by China. That's what you're going to be fucking looking at.
What is a
Irish
kulak?
potato famine.
What's a kulak?
What do you think a kulak is?
I know what a kulak is. You tell me. You're the Marxist.
No, I want to know what you think.
A kulak is someone that owned a certain piece of land that was not allowed to own that same piece of land because of Lenin and Stalin's government. And if they owned more than it, what happened to them?
And do you know what? Okay,
No, just answer the question. I'm curious.
What did happen to them?
They went to a gulag. Do you believe those exist?
Yeah, 100% gulags.
How many people
exist.
died in the gulag?
Do you know what a gulag
No, just like
is?
more or less. I just want to know.
Do you know what a gulag is?
Yeah, a forced labor camp, or it could be a forced death
You mean
camp.
like the forced labor camps we have in the United States of America, which, by the way, the United States has more people in forced labor than any other country.
Where?
In our federal prison system.
How'd they get
and
to?
our state
Wait, hold on.
prison
How'd they get to
system.
prison?
They committed crimes.
Oh,
And
okay. So it's not forced. They made a choice.
Are you familiar with the?
Wait, no, that's a phenomenal red herring argument you made. I'm just
No,
curious.
it's not
just
a red herring.
I just want to know how many people died in the gulags.
No,
more or less. I'm just curious.
How many people died in American prisons?
Hold on a second. I'm just curious. Gulags. How many people died? I'm just curious. Give me a number. 10 million, 15, 20, 25 million, 30 million?
You know, there's this really amazing anecdote. It's really interesting. You see, and
100,000?
No,
like, just I want a number, like
listen,
more or less.
Listen, because let's talk about how they get these numbers, right?
So was Alexander Solzhenitsyn a liar?
I don't know who that is.
You're kidding me. You're a Marxist that you do not know who Alexander Solzhenitsyn is. He wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago, which was a first-person account. He actually was in a gulag.
Come on.
So, and you don't even know who he is.
You know that people that worked on it admitted that they just made up a lot of those numbers, right?
He lived in one, my friend.
There's a lot of people who lived in the gulags. In fact, there's a really great.
Yeah, and so they're liars?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of
Okay,
people that lie about communism
so
on a
let me
daily
get this right.
basis.
Let me get this straight. So the pastor who spent a decade in a forced labor camp with 1 hour of sunshine a day, Joseph Bondarenko, he lied about that
I mean,
because he wanted to just spread the gospel. I'm curious, just kind of like what your belief is on gulags, so we can just have like a similar.
okay, I'll tell you. I'll give you a
Yeah.
really great example.
What?
What happened? What happened to the people that were let out of those gulags?
They wrote books like the Gulag Archipelago that
No.
brought down the
Most of
USSR.
Most of them actually ended up right back in those same gulags because, this is to be very, very clear, that's their normal prison system. That is the normal prison system that they had, just to be clear. Because who do you think set up the gulags?
So you're trying to tell me that
No,
the
no.
people that were put in the prisons were not political prisoners?
No.
So what happened to the Mensheviks?
Most of the people.
What the forced imprisonment of the Mensheviks? So
Most
tell me
of the people.
how did Trotsky die?
What do you mean, an
Who
assassination?
who killed Trotsky?
Look.
No, tell me who killed Trotsky?
Are we gonna talk about economic theories?
We
or are
will.
gonna
No,
talk
but no,
about
I'm just
Lenin's for
curious,
sake of
just
that?
like, because I'm just trying to understand. You say you're a Leninist.
I mean, who killed
So-
Salvador Allende?
So 66 million people died in the gulags, rough estimation. Does that not concern you?
I mean, most of those numbers are inflated. Like, you gotta really understand this. Like, the reality is that was their normal prison system. If
I have a few notes here, if I may. So firstly, the video is edited for brevity. There is a link below if you want to check out the full debate between Kirk and Ben, or if you believe I may be misrepresenting anyone's views, you're welcome to do that. It's about an hour-long debate. Either way, but please do consider subscribing to this channel to support independent media. Either way, if you think I'm misrepresenting. Anyways, secondly, on Ben mentioning the U.S. prison system, in response to being asked about, in response to the discussion on gulags, it's an interesting topic. I guess it's just interesting for reference. For statistics sake, the Russian, the USSR gulags imprisoned about per capita is still about 3 times more people than we in prison. Of course, we are the world leaders in imprisoning our own citizens. So not great. And if it came up in topic, if it came up in discussion, I would say something like, oh yeah, it's not good. We need to possibly do something about it. It's probably probably comes from the fact that we have a for-profit prison system. It's also has a lot to do with the war on drugs, which is tied into the systemic racism, and that's like that's like how this discussion might go. But if I was to say instead something like yeah, but it's not as bad as the gulags. That's like that's a way of defending it, right? It's not that would mean something like I'm okay with this thing because it's not as bad as this other thing, or we shouldn't worry about it, right? Or especially if that's the only thing I had to say, and for statistics, or for the sake of mentioning particular numbers, a bit, at some point in this discussion, Charlie is going to grossly overestimate the number of deaths in the Gulag prison camps. He's gonna say something like 60 million or something. It's the low estimates are like 2 million and let's say 2 to 10 million deaths. from these, and about at the height there was about 2.4 million prisoners. So again, remember the population is about a little more than half of our current population when when you're statistically comparing the prisons. But anyway, so the prisons, there's 2.4 million prisoners, about of which 500,000 were political prisoners. Maybe it's because what they said or what party they belonged to, or even I think that probably includes the some people you're arrested for proselytizing different religions, or church leaders or whatever. It's so that's why, and people were literally worked to death in these camps. So that's what a gulag is, and that's what Ben spends about 20 minutes in this debate, 15, 20 minutes just defending. There's a lot of I think I'm going to cut out. It's pretty boring.
Let me ask you this. So how many people died in the Holocaust, would you say?
I don't know. I'm not a Holocaust expert.
How about like 8 million? Would you say that's fair?
So I know at a minimum there's 6 million Jews that died.
Okay, so why are those numbers accurate, yet the gulag ones aren't?
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that up, because the truth of the matter is, if you look at the people, right, if you look at the denazification of Western Europe, what you end up having is you have a lot of people, like, for example, right, like Nazi government officials that get put in charge of West Germany, right? Then you have Nazi officials that get put in charge of institutions like NATO, and then you have a lot of these Nazis that quite literally set up institutions, right?
Like who?
Put out information.
What are you
put
talking
out
about?
information.
Like name one person.
Look at the first commander of NATO. Literally, look at the first NATO commanders. They literally brought in people from Nazi Germany.
Maybe we're just on different planets here, quite honestly, because I've actually met countless, thousands of people that were in these gulags, and their stories and their firsthand perspectives. And they did nothing wrong to be put in there, except they had the different political viewpoints, or they were pastors. And then you embrace a political worldview that does that.
Well, let's take this for example. Let's imagine that you're a serial murderer in the USSR, right? Let's imagine, and then you go to the gulag, right? What's the
Well, no,
easiest
I'm not imagining.
opportunity?
I'm talking about pastors. I'm talking about
No.
people
'Cause,
that
like,
have.
this is the reality. Because if you want to
No,
talk
it's
about,
not the
like,
reality.
There's
I'm
plenty of documentaries. Like, look, for example, right? For example, okay.
So I'm just gonna make
Radio Free Europe
So-
did this really great interview session where they literally went to people that were in these gulags, and it was so funny because when Radio Free Europe puts out this video about these people who used to live in the gulags, they asked them, what do you think about Stalin? And they basically said, because remember, right? You remember that the USSR was invaded by the Nazis, right? And you also
Yes,
remember
and then
that
they deterred the invasion.
you
But what
also
happened
remember
before
that the USSR
they wiped out.
had
They
a
almost wiped
civil
out
war,
all
right?
of Ukraine.
You also realize
wait,
they
hold
had
on.
a civil war,
The civil
right?
war was between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks because they couldn't determine what blend of communism they wanted.
Okay,
After they
you know-
overthrew the Romanov dynasty, right?
But
It
you
was
also have the White Army. Do you know what the White Army is?
I'm very familiar with the White Army.
You know the royalists, the people that were
Yes,
trying to.
of course, but
Okay,
I'm
like,
just.
So
we'll
hold up.
close
So
on
if
this
you have
topic.
a civil war,
but
are you going to put
I just
people
want to
in
reinforce
jail
for the audience here,
if they start
which
a civil
is
war in your country?
you.
I know the United States
you
doesn't like to jail insurrectionists.
Remarkably,
but that's what they did in the USSR.
just made an argument that was pro-Gulag, and
yeah, they had a prison system. That's correct.
It kind of does explain some of your other views because we're just living on different planets, like Team Reality, Team Narnia.
So
quite honestly.
how is our prison system better?
Wait, hold on a second. For example, you got a lawyer. We have an independent judiciary.
Ask Steven Donziger. You think the United States doesn't do show trials? Look at Guantanamo. What are those
Hold on a
people
second.
doing
What
in
you're trying to do
Guantanamo
is
Bay?
indict the entire Western legal tradition and conflate it with the Leninist, Stalinist. We're going to kill half the population we don't like. Look,
No,
you can
what
have.
you're trying to do is you're trying to take a country that had to deal with a civil war, that had to deal with an invasion, and compare that to the United States today.
I'll close with this. You are defending genocide, which is quite honestly a remarkable
No,
thing to see in
hold
real
up.
time.
Stop right here,
You are
because,
defending
look,
genocide of Joseph Stalin
let's be
and Vladimir
very, very
Lenin,
clear.
the intentional destruction and
See,
killing of 65 million
this is
people.
what I'm talking about.
And no,
Like,
there's no middle ground in genocide. That's your opinion. You're pro Lenin too.
Yeah, I mean, Lenin did a lot of really great things for the USSR. They literally brought what was a feudal peasant society to be a major world superpower.
How about the Ukrainian famine? How was that?
What about the Ukrainian famine?
Like the 6 million people Lenin intentionally killed through forced starvation and famine?
I mean, it's pretty ridiculous to frame that as intentional, right? Like, let's be real, right? There was a famine, and we can argue about the mismanagement of famines, but capitalists have mismanaged famines all the
Well, hold on
time.
a second.
This is a perfect example. There's this really great story, right? Where, you know, you have Winston Churchill talking to Stalin. He's like, hey, how many people died in the famine? And Stalin, obviously not wanting to talk about it, they had bigger things to deal with, you know, like World War II. He puts his hands up. And Winston Churchill walks away and says, oh yeah, that means 10 million. He must mean 10 million. Now, we can obviously talk about mismanagement of famines, but if we're going to talk about mismanagement of famines, why don't we talk about the people in India that Winston Churchill killed?
What about
That's
the
not
one-child
pro-concept.
policy for
Hold
40
up.
years?
No, we need to stop right here, because first and foremost, you pushed earlier the double genocide theory, which,
No,
by the way,
you-
Holocaust scholars have very
You are pro-genocide,
explicitly...
but anyway.
No,
So this next example of Ben denying genocides involves the Holodomor. It's a little bit obtuse. I feel like I'll give a quick overview of the Holodomor and then explain what Ben means by inciting this quote double genocide defense. The Holodomor refers to the 1932-1933 man-made famine in mainly in Ukraine, but also the surrounding areas. We say man-made famine because there was no real famine. Simply the USSR made the quotas for the community farms more than the output more than the farms were capable of outputting. So they literally took all the food out of this region and millions died. This is there's some debate as to if the ethnic Ukrainians were being targeted, or most consider it a genocide. It's more accurately a genocide than I believe than a famine. I mean, just saying it's a famine. I mean, anyway. Right, so that's the Holodomor. But okay, so Ben's going to mention something. He's going to accuse Charlie of using the double genocide defense. But when Ben says double genocide defense, he's referring to the idea. It's called the idea two genocides of equal severity occurred in Eastern Europe, but more accurately, it's used by those who the descendants of those who participated in the Holocaust, especially in the Poland, Ukraine region, that they might say, I never actually heard someone say this, but something to the extent of that the Jews didn't do enough to defend to mitigate the Holodomor. So their killing of the Jews is somewhat defensible. Again, I've never actually heard someone make that statement. It's more, but there's some scholarly articles written about this sort of defense, and they dubbed it the double genocide theory. But Ben is going to use that. He's going to use that against anyone who brings up the Holodomor, which is a genocide by a communist regime. That means he's going to defend it. So he's going to, anyone who brings up the Holodomor, he's going to accuse of basically Nazi propaganda. He's going to say that they're using the double genocide theory. That even just bringing up the Holodomor, it's really fucking it seems like a small thing, and they're not on it for very long, but the thought behind it is truly deranged, and indefensible, like many of Ben's positions are.
child policy for 40 years.
No. We need to stop right here because first and foremost, you pushed earlier the double genocide theory, which,
No,
by the way, Holocaust scholars have very
You are pro-genocide,
explicitly.
but anyway.
No. Stop right here.
Saying no doesn't make it right.
The double genocide theory is literally Nazi propaganda. The whole idea was to say that the obvious, mismanagement of a famine, they're trying to equate that to the invasion and the mass murder committed by the Nazis. They're literally Nazis that intentionally push that theory. Why do you think that Israel, to this very day, actually has tensions with specific people in Ukraine who are pushing that double genocide theory? Because the truth is, a famine and the mismanagement of resources
I'm talking about, in addition,
is not
mass
the
graves,
same
gulags, and all that.
as an
But let's talk. Where is it a better place to live? Seoul, South Korea, or Pyongyang, North Korea?
I don't know. It depends on who you are.
You believe there's not even a question of who, like an average everyday worker, Pyongyang, North Korea, or Seoul, South Korea, right now?
It really depends on who you are. Ask poor people in South Korea how they're feeling about their system of government.
They are kissing the ground every day that they are.
Why are there so many defectors that defect from North Korea that then defect back to North Korea?
Hi there. Thanks for watching to the end. Please like or subscribe to support independent investigative journalism and strange anime characters giving you the news.